As always, before we start, I need to give you a warning. This one's gonna get dark. Now, this is our 6th episode. We've spent 5 episodes on this channel examining revenge. Men who waited years, women who burned down everything. People who went so far past justice that we had to invent new words for what they became. And every one of these characters knew exactly what they were doing. Edmond Dantes chose his revenge deliberately. Medea argued with herself and chose anyway. Amy Dune planned for months and still went through with it. And Atreus felt nothing and called it justice. With each of these episodes, we try to push a new boundary, and today's story's no different because it is different. Today, we're talking about a woman who I genuinely believe never fully understood what she became. This is a story of a woman who was broken so quietly and so completely by the person who was supposed to love her most that by the time she did the thing that defined her entire story, she may not have understood that it was wrong. Now, this isn't a defense. It's something far more disturbing than a defense. This is A Rose for Emily, written by William Faulkner in 1930. This is one of the darkest short stories in American literature. And the One Dark Margins episode that'll make you feel something you won't be able to name for a while after it's over. The story's about a Southern aristocratic family, a father, a daughter, and a house. Emily Grierson's the daughter. She grows up in Jefferson, Mississippi in the late 1800s. The Griersons are old money, old name, old pride. The kind of family that's been in town long enough that the town shaped itself around them. And they've shaped themselves around the town's expectations in return. Emily's father is the center of everything. Faulkner describes him the way you describe a painting. Upright in a doorway, a horsewhip in his hand, his daughter standing behind him. Now, that image is important. Emily's always behind him. Always in his shadow. Always defined by his presence rather than her own. Emily's father drives away every man who comes to court her. Not one, not two, but every single one. No man is good enough for a Grierson. No suitor meets his standard. No relationship is permitted to develop past the point where he can terminate it with a look or a word or a simple devastating power of a father who has decided that his daughter belongs to him. Now, I know there's some common phrases in these episodes, and here's one of them. Please, for a moment, think about what this does to a person across years. Every time Emily begins to feel something toward another person, begins to reach towards someone, the hand that raised her closes around that reaching and pulls it back. She learns, slowly and completely, that love and possession are the same thing. That the person you love is something you keep. That letting go's not part of the arrangement. She doesn't learn this consciously. She doesn't sit down one day and decide to believe it. It's simply the only model of love she's ever been shown. And then, her father dies. And when he dies, Emily tells the town he isn't dead. Remember, she's taught not to let go. So for 3 days, she tells everyone who comes to the door, neighbors, officials, concerned citizens, that her father is simply not receiving visitors. 3 days go by. She keeps his body in the house for those 3 days before she finally breaks down and lets them take him. Now, the town, Faulkner tells us, is not entirely unsympathetic. They understand, in the way small towns understand things about their own people, that Emily has nothing left now. Her father was everything. The house and the man inside it were the entire architecture of her existence. They give her time and they give her space. But instead of helping, they look away. And this Looking away is one of the things Faulkner is most quietly angry about in this whole story. The town watches Emily for decades. They see the signs, they smell the smell. They notice that things don't quite add up. And they keep looking away because she's a Grierson, and that name still means something. And sometimes it's easier to not know. Emily emerges from her grief eventually. Months pass, years pass, and then a man named Homer Barron arrives. Now, Homer Barron's everything Emily Grierson's not. He's northern, he's working class, he's loud and charming, and completely unconcerned with the social architecture of Jefferson, Mississippi. He arrives to oversee a construction project and immediately becomes the most interesting person in town simply by being entirely himself without apology. Well, this catches Emily's attention. She notices him, and for the first time in her adult life, with her father gone, with the controlling presence removed, she reaches towards someone and nothing pulls her back. They're seen together, riding on Sundays, talking, something developing between them that the town watches with the particular intensity of a small community that has very little else to watch. The ladies of Jefferson are scandalized. A Grierson with a day laborer, a southern aristocrat with a northerner. The whispers are immediate and constant. But Emily doesn't hear the whispers, or if she hears them, she doesn't care. She's experiencing something she's never been permitted to experience before. And that's someone who might stay. And when Homer signals clearly enough that the town picks it up, even if Emily doesn't want to, that he's not the marrying type, that this is not heading where Emily needs it to head, that Homer Barron, charming and alive and thoroughly himself, is going to leave Jefferson the way he arrived, without asking anyone's permission. So the next thing we see is Emily goes to a druggist. She asks for arsenic. The druggist, as was required by law, asks her what she needs it for. Emily says nothing. She simply looks at him until he wraps it up and hands it over. The town assumes she's going to kill herself. Well, she doesn't. Homer Barron is seen entering Emily's house one evening, and he's never seen again. Not that night, not the next day, not ever. He simply stops existing in the visible world of Jefferson, Mississippi. And shortly after Homer disappears, a smell begins. Not immediately, but gradually. The way certain things announce themselves gradually so that by the time you fully register them, you've already been living with them for longer than you realized. The neighbors complain, the town council meets. They decide, because she's a Grierson and because it's easier, to send men to quietly spread lime around her property in the middle of the night rather than confront her directly. Well, after time, the smell eventually fades. Emily closes the top floor of her house. She seals it. She moves down to the main floor, and that's where she continues to live. She ends up giving china painting lessons for a few years, receiving the occasional visitor, becoming less and less visible to the town until she's more myth than person. Her hair grows gray, then iron gray, then white. She grows heavier. She's seen less. The town watches her become a monument to something they can't quite name. But they keep looking anyway. Decades pass, and Emily Grierson finally dies at the age of 74. Now, they set her up a lavish funeral, and after the funeral, after Emily's buried in the cedared cemetery with the ranked and anonymous graves of Union and Confederate soldiers, the town finally opens the sealed room. They have to break down the door, and when they do, the room is frozen in time. If you had to describe it, I guess the only way you could do so was to call it a bridal suite. It had rose-colored curtains, rose-shaded lights, the delicate and patient decor of a room prepared for a life that was supposed to begin there. On the dressing table, the man's toiletries. Silver-backed, monogrammed, a suit laid out carefully, 2 shoes and a discarded collar. And on the wedding bed was the remains of Homer Barron. The body was so far gone that it had become simply part of the bed, part of the room, part of the frozen rose-colored world Emily had built around him. And on the pillow beside him, a single indentation, the shape of a head. And in that indentation, a long strand of iron-gray hair. Emily had been sleeping beside him. Not for days, not for months, for 40 years. Now, to get a grasp of what Faulkner's trying to tell us is that the strand of iron-gray hair on that pillow is not the most disturbing thing in a rose for Emily. The most disturbing thing is that it makes a terrible kind of sense. Emily Grierson was taught one thing about love by the only person who was supposed to teach her. And that was that love means you don't let go. Her father never let go. He held on so completely to her future, her choices, her identity, her right to reach toward another human being that when he died, she couldn't process his absence for 3 days. Her mind simply refused to accept that someone who loved her could leave. So, when Homer Barron, the first person Emily ever chose for herself, signaled that he was going to leave, Emily did the only thing her father had ever taught her love required. She made sure he stayed. This is the psychological wound at the center of A Rose for Emily. Not madness in a simple sense, not evil in any recognizable sense. A model of love so damaged at its foundation that possession and devotion become genuinely indistinguishable. Now, here's what the research on attachment psychology tells us about what Emily's father created. Children who grow up in environments where love is conditional, where affection is withheld or controlled or used as a mechanism of ownership, develop what psychologists called anxious attachment. A deep, bone-level terror that the people they love will leave. A compulsion to hold on tighter than is healthy. An inability to accept that other people have the right to go. Emily's father didn't just drive away her suitors, he installed in her a belief system about love that made Homer Barron's departure literally unthinkable. Not wrong, not painful, but unthinkable. And so, she didn't think it. She didn't process Homer leaving as a loss to grieve, she processed it as a problem to solve. This is where victim and monster become the same wound in the same person. Emily is unquestionably a victim. What her father did to her, the years of control, the isolation, the systematic destruction of her ability to form healthy attachment, that's genuine, serious, lasting damage. She didn't choose to become what she became. And because of that, she poisoned a man and slept beside his corpse for 40 years. Both of those things are completely true simultaneously. And the reason A Rose for Emily's been read and studied and argued about for nearly 100 years is that Faulkner refuses to resolve that tension. He doesn't ask you to forgive Emily. He doesn't ask you to condemn her. He simply asks you to understand how a person becomes something monstrous and to sit with that discomfort of that understanding. Because understanding is not the same as excusing. And the difference between those two things, that space between comprehension and forgiveness, is where the most honest conversations about human nature actually live. Edmond Dantes chose his revenge with full understanding of what he was doing. Medea chose hers and argued with herself first. Amy Doone planned hers for months with cold precision. And Atreus felt nothing and called it justice. But Emily Grierson may never understood that what she did had a name. And that quiet, terrible absence of self-awareness is the most haunting thing Dark Margins has examined yet. A Rose for Emily is 11 pages long. 11 pages. You can read it in 20 minutes, and it'll stay with you for years. It's in public domain, and I'll link it in the description, but I wanted to say something real quick. This is the first time the Sounds of Stories and the Dark Margins has ever gotten together. I narrate audiobooks for the Sounds of Stories, so what I did is I did a reimagining of A Rose for Emily. I made it a little shorter. I know sometimes time's a burden, so it's about 7 minutes long. I give a little introduction and an outro, so together it's about 8 minutes. But I read it, so if you'd like to listen to the same voice reading it to you as that's speaking to you now, I'll link that in the description below too, and it's A Rose for Emily under the Sounds of Stories. And you can read it, or you can listen to it, but before you look up anything else about it, you can come to the end without knowing what's true. And that's the only way to feel what Faulkner intended. Now, next time, we stay in American literature, but we go somewhere louder, more violent, more operatic. A revenge story about a man who loses everything to a white whale and decides that the whale is going to pay for it. I'm telling you, if you know what it is, well done, but if you don't, it doesn't end well for anybody. Subscribe, because next episode we talk about what happens when revenge stops being about justice and becomes a religion. I'm Bobby Garrison, and this is Dark Margins. I'll see you in the next chapter.